This work session of the Board of Education of the Cleveland Municipal School District will now come to order. Mr. Stockdale, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Ellicott?
Here.
Mrs. Hudnall?
Here.
Mr. Briggs?
Here.
Mr. Hurd?
Here.
Ms. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. LeBrun?
Here.
Mrs. Link?
Here.
Dr. Sridhar? Mrs. Welch-Howell?
Here.
There are 8 members present.
Thank you. I'd ask everyone who wishes to rise and join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The chair will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the board business meeting of May 21st, 2024.
So moved.
Thank you. Do I hear a second? Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. Next, I'm pleased to introduce our CEO, Dr. Morgan, for this evening's CEO report.
Thank you, Chair Ellicott. So, this is our last meeting of this school year, so it's been definitely a great year, and excited to share just some updates. I know next week during my CEO update, I'll have some data presentations, a third of really our update on some of our goals, and we're starting to see some of the progress of this year come in, and some really exciting academic gains. So excited to share some more on the culture front, and also share some exciting academic updates. We also at our next meeting next week, will be honoring all of those who retired this academic school year, and looking forward to celebrate that. And shout out to the staff member who suggested that we actually think about how we would honor all of our retirees. We thought it was an excellent idea, and looking forward to celebrate all of our retirees upcoming. This week during our CEO update, we have 2 items. One is a review of our annual review of our student code of conduct, with just some updates that are taking place given our new bargaining agreement with the Cleveland Teachers Union. And then also we have a resolution that we'll be bringing to vote. First, the student code of conduct. So if we can get that presentation up, I just want to share some updates. I do have, if there's board members, if you have any follow-up questions on the Code of Conduct, with me today we do have our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Selena Florence, and our General Counsel, Andrew Roman, is actually attending one of our graduations. We have our one of our high school graduations tonight, and 2 of our executive leadership team members are out at that graduation. So if you do have some questions that we have to table, we will get that for you before this goes to vote next week. Next slide, and I realize I don't have the clicker, so I'll name next slide as we, that'll probably help as we go through. But I'll narrate this slide here. One of the things that we have to agree upon every year is our student code of conduct. This is something we bring before the board annually, and we work with the Cleveland Teachers Union on this. Actually, the Cleveland Teachers Union executive leadership has been working with us on the implementation of the code of conduct, and there are 2 items that went in this year's contract that will actually go into effect on July 1 that are really pertinent, that we want to make sure that we share with the board, that will be in this updated student code of conduct. One is the storage of cell phones and student cell phones and electronic devices during the instructional day for students. And the other policy is an update to our ombudsman's office to be more favorable to our families and the work that our family is doing. So first, really on the cell phone collection and storage policy. So a few things to note here. One of the things we recognize as a district, just from looking at our data, was the increased number of discipline infractions, whether it was student to student, or it could be disruptions that were taking place in school when students are actually utilizing their cell phones. We actually had several schools that actually have started implementing a no cell phone policy within their school, and in those schools that were doing it, we saw a decrease disciplinary infractions improve culture and climate, and in some case, increase academic gains. As you heard from our governor, Governor DeWine, this is actually a measure that the state is moving towards for most districts. And I believe a year from now, all districts will have to have some form of a cell phone policy. There are local districts around us that are actually already implementing this. Akron schools that we've worked with, Warrensville Heights, where I've had the opportunity to speak to that superintendent there, as well as Dayton, where there are improved culture and climate measures that are taking place in these systems that are using it. So as part of this year's contract, we worked with the Cleveland Teachers Union on making sure that this was something that we would be implementing in our schools this year in August. And so I'll explain a little bit more high level of what this policy means in implementation. And we're actually still in the process of mapping out the guidance. So the way the policy works is that students will not be able to have their cell phone during the instructional day. So students who bring their cell phone to school will have the opportunity to store that cell phone throughout the day. And it will be stored and locked by the school. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that procedure will take place. There are a couple of exceptions that will go with the collection and storage of the device. One include times where a parent actually needs to still get a hold of their student, and this is something that will happen in limited cases and also needs to be worked upon in advance with the school leader and also have a procedure mapped out. There are also some other limited exceptions where a student may need to have a device such as for instructional use, or if they're not going to be in the building, such as a field trip. There are some exceptions there. And then there's also the exception where in some students' IEP where they must have a cellular device as part of an accommodation for their IEP. These are limited exceptions, ones that must be documented, and also ones that we will have the documentation for. So there's a process and procedure for it. It's not one where you could just arbitrarily share any of these and say, this is why I would have my cell phone for the day. And of course, with all of these things, more guidance and implementation procedures are set to follow. Students who violate this policy, there are a couple of consequences that we have already mapped out that's mapped out in the Student Code of Conduct. One is written notification to the student's family when this violation has first taken place. And then other consequences can include confiscation of the student's cell phone for the entire school day or longer, depending on how the student has how many times the student has repeated this infraction, or if this is a pattern. The increased time of that confiscation can be subject to be longer than a day, up to the entire academic year. In implementing the policy, we're giving schools the let me go one back. The other thing about this policy is any student who chooses to bring a cell phone is doing it at their own risk. One of the things that is mapped out in the Student Code of Conduct is really the exception or the encouragement from district staff that students, if they do not need their cell phone, that we are not, that they actually leave it at home. That way it's actually safe. The district, as well as its employees, are not responsible for theft, for damage, or anything that happens to the student's cell phone at any time. We will have a policy for collecting those cell phones, for storing them, whether it's through a yonder bag or whether it's through a locker, and we'll have those procedures. But students who bring their cell phone and knowing that it'll be collected are doing it at their own risk. And so there's an encouragement for families to really think about the risk when sending their student to school with a cell phone. And I also want to note that this is during the instructional day. We do know that students will may need a cell phone for after-school activities and different procedures after school, even if they're in the building. This is only during those instructional times. So when implementing the cell phone policy, each school will determine what that policy looks like. So there's some administrative guidelines that we're coming up with that looks consistent across the board, but each school can determine what is the method of the device collection, such as yonder bags, whether it's a locker or whether it's some other type of procedure. The personnel who will be collecting the cell phone, we did write it in the contract where teachers are not required to collect the cell phone but can collect the cell phone if that's agreed upon at their school level. And also there's procedures in terms of what will allow a teacher to collect a cell phone. And then also identifying the location of the device collection. Our preference, and one of the things we mention in the guidelines and the student code of conduct, is that this is collected upon coming into the building. And so schools are mapping this out, but we are providing some supports of what this will look like. So we are currently now in the research phase, and almost a little bit beyond it. There's been a working group that has been meeting. Of our academics team, we have a point person with the Cleveland Teachers Union that we're working with to really think about the implementation of this policy and getting ready to put out all the guidance and marketing next month in preparation for the start of the school year. We're researching best practices. We're researching from other districts to learn what districts have done and what are some of those research best practices. We also are putting together videos of some of our own schools that are already doing this procedure and how they are doing the procedure, how they're collecting it. We have many school leaders that have attested to how well the policy has worked, and so we want to codify this knowledge, learn from the best practices, and share that out. We are also, I talked about this working group that is it's a combination of our administrative team, CTU partners, our external affairs team, safety and security personnel, that is constantly looking at the implementation of this and also making sure that information is going out. We've already had some information go out in my weekly focus newsletter that went out last week, just high level about the cell phone policy and also sharing some anecdotes of schools that have done it. I think we featured George Washington Carver. That was also featured on, I believe it may have been Channel 5 news where it was featured. And so there are best practices. I know with anything, when there is change management and there is change that is taking place, there may be angst. Everything is not perfect in the beginning, but with all things, we want to make sure we have a procedure, a process in place, and that we are holding ourselves accountable, but also giving ourselves flexibility and grace to grow and learn. And on that last point around flexibility and grace to grow and learn, that working group will be collecting information, looking at data trends, with recommendations of how we can make the policy even stronger in the future. So that is the cell phone policy, of which I'll take questions in a moment, but I do want to get to our second item of the code of conduct that is changing, which is around our district ombuds office. Currently, for families, in order for families to reach out to the ombudsman's office, there is currently in the student code of conduct specific guidelines around the timeline, the steps and the procedures they must take before they reach out to the ombudsman's office. Based on feedback we've heard from families, whether it is just how hard or easy it may be to contact the ombudsman's office, or how hard or easy it has been to get a response up until they contact the ombudsman's office, we have made a change in the code of conduct that eliminates the timelines. This is allowing families to reach out to the ombudsman's office sooner and also get a resolve to their problem quicker. We did not want to put all those steps in place. We also recommend, we still highly recommend that families work with the school to resolve their issue first. Of course, when you're contacting central office or the ombudsman's office, that is a team that is working across the issues throughout the entire district and will learn to know about your issue from the school's context, but may not know that specifically. And so we really recommend that people are working with their school, working with their principal, working with the network leader who knows that building, knows the issues much more intimately than someone at central office or the ombudsman's office. But with this update in the code of conduct, it does eliminate those timelines. With that, those are the two updates, and everything else in the code of conduct is the same as was the previous year. And so with that, I'll see if there are questions.
Is there any discussions from board members on the code of conduct presentation? Okay,
All right.
thank you.
The next part of my report is bringing forth a resolution. So this evening, the Board of Education will be considering a resolution to rename the district's East Professional Center for Arnold Pinckney. Arnold Pinckney grew up in Youngstown and moved to Cleveland after graduating from Albion College in Michigan and serving in the U.S. Army in Germany. He was a successful entrepreneur, eventually founding his own insurance agency, Pinckney Perry Insurance. He served on this Board of Education from 1967 to 1978 and was the board president from 1971 to 1978. Mr. Pinckney was an inspiring civic leader and skilled political organizer for over 5 decades, managing or serving in a leadership role on many political campaigns, including those of Mayor Carl Stokes, Congressman Louis Stokes, Governor John Gilligan, Governor Richard Celeste, Mayor Michael White, Mayor Frank Jackson, and the presidential campaigns of President Hubert Humphrey, President Jimmy Carter, and the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Numerous Cleveland school levies and many judicial campaigns and other campaigns for local office, and he continued to advise and mentor future generations of Cleveland's leaders right up until the time of his death in 2014 at the age of 84. We have been discussing the renaming for some time, and just last week, Cleveland City Council adopted a resolution supporting the school district in the renaming of East Professional Center for Arnold Pinckney. Mr. Pinckney's significant contributions as a board member and board president have profoundly impacted our school district, and he will always be remembered for his passion and commitment to the education of Cleveland's greatest asset, our children. We are pleased and honored this evening to bring before the board for your consideration a board resolution renaming the East Professional Center to the Arnold Pinckney East Professional Center. That resolution will be coming for a board shortly on our agenda. If any board members have any questions, I'll take those, or I know our board chair will take any questions or remarks.
Dr. Morgan, since the resolution is coming up in just a moment, we'll reserve discussion for that time, if it's okay. Are there any other CEO agenda items?
That's all on my, that's all for the CEO update.
Thank you. Okay. While the board does not usually vote on resolutions at our work sessions, we do have some time-sensitive items that we would like to vote on this evening. First is Resolution 5.01. The chair will now entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 5.01, determining to proceed with the submission to the electors of the Cleveland Municipal School District the single question of the issuance of school improvement bonds in the aggregate principal amount of $295 million for the purpose of constructing, renovating, remodeling, enlarging, furnishing, equipping, and otherwise improving school district buildings and facilities, and acquiring, clearing, equipping, and otherwise improving school district building and facility sites, and of levying an additional tax for the purpose of paying the current expenses of the school district and of partnering community schools. Is there a motion?
So move.
Thank you. Dr. Morgan?
Yes, this is a second and final resolution the board must adopt in order to place on the November 5th, 2024 ballot the single question of 1, issuing bonds in the amount of $295 million for permanent improvements of the school district, and 2, levying a tax of 8.6 mils for the current expenses of the school district and our partnering community schools, of which 8.1 mils is allocated to the school district and 0.5 mils is allocated to partnering community schools for a period of 10 years, which the county fiscal officer estimates will generate $52,068 annually. On May 21st, the board adopted a resolution declaring the necessity of issuing the bonds and levying the tax for current expenses and renewing the increasing this levy and requesting the Cuyahoga County Fiscal Officer to make certain certifications. Those certifications are attached to the resolution. The ballot language in the form in which it will appear on the November ballot is also attached. Following board adoption of this second resolution, we will file both board resolutions, the fiscal officer certifications, and the ballot language with the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections no later than August 7th, 2024.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan. As Board of Education Chair, I want to again express my strong support for this resolution and for the operating levy and bond issue. As you know, the method by which schools are funded, or public schools are funded in Ohio, requires school districts to periodically come before voters and ask them to support levies to pay for operating expenses and support the education of our students. For the past several years, the voters of Cleveland have stood with our students and passed several levies that the board has put forward. And in February, the board adopted a deficit reduction plan with the support of our team to address the pending deficit that we have identified in our 5-year forecast. That notwithstanding, and the implementation of that having started, we're still in need of additional revenue in order to provide Cleveland's children with the education that they need and deserve. So I asked my colleagues who last month unanimously supported the resolution of necessity to again join me in support of this resolution to proceed to submit this question to the voters. Is there any further discussion? Okay, Mr. Stockdale, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudnall?
Yes.
Mr. Briggs?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
Mrs. Walchow?
Yes.
The motion passes with 8 votes.
Thank you. This resolution is adopted. The chair will now entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 5.02, renaming East Professional Center to Arnold Pinckney East Professional Center. Thank you. Do I hear a second? Thank you. Dr. Morgan, anything further on this?
No, as I discussed in my CEO report, this is a resolution to the board for renaming East Professional Center to the Arnold Pinckney East Professional Center.
Thank you. Back in 2021, the Board of Education assessed the appropriateness of many of our schools and made changes to 3 at the time. We still have work to do on building a process that will allow us to, on a more regular cadence, assess the names of schools and make sure that they are named appropriately and that they honor those that we think are important to honor in our community today in support of our students. And I believe the board should continue to assess those things. By naming East Professional Center for Arnold Pinckney, our board will be reflecting the values of equity and community that we previously prioritized in the last set of school renamings, and honoring an individual who has made significant contributions to our city, state, and nation, particularly in the areas of education and civil rights. Mr. Pinckney was a gifted community leader who worked to elect presidents, governors, mayors, congressmen, congresswomen, and numerous other elected officials who have led our community over the past 60 years. In fact, Mr. Bertzloff is wearing a button for, I believe, a Pinckney campaign today. With this resolution, the board will honor and recognize Mr. Pinckney's work and dedication to Cleveland's children for many years. And I appreciate you bringing it forward, Dr. Morgan. Is there any further discussion from board members? Oh, Ms. Hudnall.
Sure. Thank you, Chair and Dr. Morgan. Some of my colleagues know that I lecture at Cleveland State in the Urban Affairs Department, and one of the classes I teach is African American Experience. And the assignments that I was grading this morning for summer school were on school desegregation in Cleveland. So I think it's very fitting that we are giving thoughtful consideration to the resolution today. As both the chair and Dr. Morgan have shared, Mr. Pinckney's leadership to the district alone spans generations. And I know the act of his leadership at the helm of school desegregation is something I think all in this room are thankful for. I do think that it's very fitting that the building of East Professional Center, where not just some of our community will be, but mostly anyone that has interactions with CMSD will at some point be at East, is very fitting. So I thank you all for the consideration today.
Discussion from board members. Okay, hearing no further discussion, Mr. Stockdale, would you please call the roll on this motion?
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudnall?
Yes.
Mr. Briggs?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
Mrs. Welchow?
Yes.
Motion passes with 8 votes.
Thank you. This resolution is adopted, and I would like to mention that the board and CEO's team will be holding a ribbon cutting in the future to celebrate this change. Okay, this evening we have 34 resolutions in the areas of Board of Education, Finance, Operations, Academics, and Equity and Culture that will be presented to the board for discussion only. The board will be asked to consider the adoption of these resolutions at our June 25th board business meeting. I will present the first 2 Board of Education resolutions. 6.01, adopting the Cleveland Public Library tax budget for fiscal year 2025 and transmitting to the Cuyahoga County Budget Commission. Under state law, the CMSD Board of Education serves as the taxing authority and appointing authority of the Cleveland Public Library. In our role as taxing authority of the Board of Education is required to take certain actions on behalf of the Cleveland Public Library. One such action is the annual adoption of the library's tax budget. The 2025 tax budget documents the library needs to receive revenue from tax sources to cover the estimated expenditures for the budget year. I believe that, is Mr. Thomas here as well? Okay, sorry. Okay, got it. Thank you. Chief Financial Officer Carrie Kranicki, Board President Maritza Rodriguez, and Board Member Melanie Shakarian are here today. Do you have any comment or explanation that you'd like to share?
I can answer any questions.
Okay. Is there any discussion from board members on this one?
Yeah, if
Mr.
I'm
Briggs?
reading the financials correctly, they're anticipating an over $3 million deficit for this next fiscal year. And I just wonder if there's anything that they can do to help alleviate that.
It's not that we're really having a deficit, we're carrying a fund balance forward. We had an increase in our operating levy in 2019 in order to allow us to borrow against our library fund, our public library fund.
Actually, I understand that, but still, I mean, the fund balance has been reasonably consistent over the years. And that's essentially your savings account, your bank account. And without that, you're still running a $3 million deficit based on revenue and expenses.
We're not running a deficit in our general fund balance.
No, all right. This says, beginning unencumbered balance, $22,296,569. At the end,
At the end, we have almost a $20 million unencumbered balance in our general fund.
okay, but you're using the general fund to cover the expenses
Yes, that's
over
correct.
revenues.
That's correct, we are.
Yeah.
Yes. We're using our property tax revenues.
But it's still, revenue over expense is still negative. I mean, you have the general fund as a backup, but from a profit and loss statement, you're experiencing loss.
Well, we are using our property tax revenue in order to pay back our debt. So we're pledging our public library fund revenue. We issued debt, and we increased our operating levy by 2 mills in order to pay off that debt.
I understand.
We don't operate like a school system where our budgets, where our revenues equal our expenditures right now because of the way that we are paying off our library fund facility notes.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. I don't necessarily agree with it. Thank you.
Ms. Kranicki, to clarify, so is it that you're anticipating using your reserves for part of your budget?
Yes, we
And
will.
is that somewhere on here that you can point us to in the budget document?
The ending unencumbered balance in the general fund will be 19.6 million, but that's just estimated at this point.
But the beginning balance was $22,296,000.
Exactly.
So you're dipping into that because your expenses exceed your revenue.
Yeah.
Okay, that was my point. And I don't think that's a good practice ongoing.
Okay.
And we at the school system have the same issues, and we're trying very hard to address that.
We do our long-term forecasting over 10 years when we went out and issued our, when we went out for our levy.
I think that's great, but I still don't think it's good to operate it.
This isn't really a firm budget, this is really a high-level tax budget right now, you know.
Okay, but you're still,
It's not our firm operating budget. It's really just a wish list at this point and just a real high-level overview.
well, we'll take a closer look at it later in the month.
Well, the school board's not passing our operating budget, just our tax budget. And that has to be done by Ohio Revised Code.
Okay, I understand what you're saying.
Thank you, Mr. Briggs. Ms. Kornicki, perhaps we can, I see what you're saying. Perhaps we can just touch base in the interim to see if there's a way that we can perhaps demonstrate that within these documents, the reserve piece.
We're not showing a negative fund balance.
I get that. But you're operating on a profit and loss basis at a loss. I mean, you're without the general fund contribution, your expenses exceed your revenue by over $3 million.
Yes, but our fund balance is not negative. And we're forecasted out for at least 5 years to not have a negative fund balance. Like when the school district did your forecast and you're having a negative fund balance, you're going out for an operating levy. If our fund balance goes negative, we'll go back out to the voters, or...
But that's the problem that we have. We operated at a deficit, relying on our fund balance, our bank account, our backup. And that's what worries me about this budget.
Well, our board decided to increase the operating levy in order to issue the library facility notes based on the forecasting of our municipal advisor.
Okay?
We're not running a negative fund balance, and we're not expected to.
You're talking about fund balance, I'm talking about profit and loss.
We're also in the middle of a big facilities master plan that we're using these funds to pay for.
Yeah, I saw that in
We
the
didn't
capital
issue
budget.
we didn't issue a bond for that.
Right, I get that. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
I'll just encourage some discussion in the meanwhile to make sure that we're all on the same page. I appreciate the clarification. Is there any further discussion from board members? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Morgan, any comment? Thank you. The next resolution is 6.02, authorizing a professional services agreement between Julian and Group and the Board of Education of the Cleveland Municipal School District for internal audit services. Both state law and board policy provide that the Board of Education may appoint an internal auditor who reports directly to the board. While in the past, the board has employed an internal auditor, after considering hiring another full-time employee to serve as internal auditor, the board has now determined that contracting with a CPA firm for internal audit services is the most prudent and efficient way at this time to ensure that the necessary internal audit function is adequately and independently performed. Following the issuance of requests for proposals for internal audit services and following the review of those submitted proposals, with the adoption of this resolution, the board will be authorizing the attached professional services agreement with Julian and Group for internal audit services. I want to thank Ms. Welch-Howell, who serves as the Board of Education's liaison to the Audit Committee, for her work in supporting, reviewing proposals, and interviewing internal auditor candidates and firms, along with Mr. Stockdale as well. Are there any questions from board members? Dr. Morgan? Yes, Mrs. Link.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure, because I wasn't part of the process, and I'm thankful for our colleague that was, I just want to make sure, like in Mr. Stockdale's opinion, that this is something that you agree with, and, you know, it sounds good to me, but I would like your professional opinion.
Yes, so you're aware of the challenges that we've had in filling the position. I feel that with the candidate that we're getting, this person has extensive work doing audits on behalf of the auditor estate, so we're going to get expertise there that we wouldn't necessarily have in-house, and we're getting someone at the partner level with the audit company, so I feel very good about who we're bringing in compared to, what we potentially would be able to hire.
Thank you. And do we have internal auditors, like not this chief one, but at a lower level with the district?
Yes, we do. We currently have one and a vacancy that we will be moving forward with filling at this time.
Okay, and then would this person help us to fill that second position?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stockdale. Is there any other discussion from board members? Okay. Dr. Morgan, over to you for the finance resolutions.
All right, thank you, Chair Ellicott. The next 14 resolutions are finance resolution. 7.01, authorizing final appropriation adjustments to the fiscal year 2024 annual appropriation measure. With this resolution, the board will approve actions necessary at year end to balance the budget with actual revenue received, expenditures paid, and monies obligated in fiscal year 2024 to ensure beginning unencumbered cash plus revenues received during the fiscal year plus reimbursements requested by June 30th are greater than or equal to the budget. Increase certain fund balances to match current expected spending levels and encumbrance levels. Advance budget from the general fund to various grant funds that have a negative fund balance. These dollars will be returned to the general fund by September 30th. All adjustments are subject to change until the day of the board vote on June 27th. 7.02, authorizing the chief financial officer to pay all required out-of-district tuition costs. With the annual resolution, the board will authorize the administration to pay out of district tuition costs for fiscal year 2025, which are estimated to be $30 million. 7.03, authorizing the distribution of resources to partnering community schools pursuant to issue 68. With this semi-annual resolution, the board will authorize the distribution of 1.5 mils associated with the issue 68, attributable to partnering community schools on all property tax revenue received through December 1st, 2024. The list of our 12 current partnering community schools is included in the resolution. 7.04, delegating authority to the CEO to enter into contracts and purchase orders for amounts up to and including $50,000 for fiscal year 2025. With this resolution, the board will delegate authority to the CEO to enter into contracts and purchase orders for amounts up to and including $50,000 for fiscal year 2025. The board has approved similar resolutions since fiscal year 2014. 7.05, authorizing the payment of charges incurred for utility costs by the CMSD district for 2024 in the amount not to exceed $19 million. With this resolution, the board will authorize encumbrance and payment of utility expenses incurred in fiscal year 24-25. The annual estimate for utilities for gas, water, sewage, electric, and other utilities are included as part of the annual budget appropriation. 7.06, authorizing payment to Fifth Third Bank for district's credit cards and procurement cards in an amount not to exceed $5 million for fiscal year 2025. With this resolution, the board will authorize the district to make payments to Fifth Third Bank for expenses made on district-issued credit cards and P cards. 7.07, authorizing the acceptance of a gift and grant from HDNet, LLC, Arizona State University, Digital Promise Global, and William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, authorizing the CEO to spend the funds in accordance with the terms and conditions of the grants and gifts. With this resolution, the board will be accepting and authorizing the CEO to spend the following gifts and grants. From HDNet, LLC, a gift in the amount of $10,000 to support the purchase of instruments and uniforms for Harvey Rice's Wraparound Schools Music Education Program. From Arizona State University, an increase in the amount of $60,000 to support the Verizon Innovative Learning Lab mentors at Elmira, Miles Park, Stephanie Tubbs Jones, Wade Park, and Whitney Young Schools. From Digital Promise Global, a grant in the amount of $125,000 to support the extension of the 3-year Verizon Innovative Learning Lab at Douglas MacArthur Girls Leadership Academy, Euclid Park, Garfield, George Washington Carver, and Kenneth Clement Boys Leadership Academy. And from William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, a grant in the amount of $133,600 to support leadership development. 7.08, authorizing the acceptance of a grant from the Ohio Attorney General and authorizing the CEO to spend the funds in accordance with the terms and conditions of the grant. With this resolution, the board will be accepting and authorizing the expenditure of a grant from the Ohio Attorney General in the amount of $173.82 to implement the expanded Safe Passage program at Collinwood, Garrett Morgan, JFK, John Marshall, and John Adams High Schools by providing security training and camera upgrades and signage. Resolution 7.09 and 7 through 7.14 are the remaining 6 finance resolutions, and they authorize the procurement and payment of various insurance policies for the school district. 7.09 is student athletic insurance, 10 is casualty and liability insurance, 11 is for cyber risk insurance, 12 is for medical professional liability insurance, 13 is for property, boiler and machinery and crime insurance, and 14 is for terrorism liability and deadly weapons coverage.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan. Is there any discussion from the board on these resolutions? Mrs. Link?
Thank you. Dr. Morgan, on 7.02, the out-of-district tuition is 30 million. And can you just give us an example of what the payments go to?
I'm inviting our Chief Financial Officer, Kevin Stockdale, up again.
Sure. That out-of-district tuition is open enrollment tuition, and we see a fair amount of that for students who have special needs, who may enroll in another district, or just anyone who moves through open enrollment.
And is that number pretty steady like from the past, or has it changed?
This projection is staying steady with about where it was this year. So there hasn't been much change in the last few years. There's been some changes in state law, but they haven't really had an impact on Cleveland because of our long history of open enrollment up here.
Okay, and then one quick question on 7.03. I know we always give part of the levy money to the partnering schools. Do we usually have the amount on that resolution, or do we just list the schools? I just don't recall.
To my knowledge, we just list the schools.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stockdale.
I have some
Mr.
comments.
Briggs?
I
Oh, sorry.
apologize in advance.
Are they for Mr. Stockdale? Thank you, that's fine, thank you.
No, yes, stay close. 7.04, I totally agree with the $50,000 non-approval amount, but I think we should have a cap on that, a generous cap. And I think that on a quarterly basis, our CEO should give us a list of what those monies were expended for. On 7.06, do we do any audits on the P cards? Are those pretty carefully monitored?
And
I think it's a great efficiency rather than going through the purchase orders.
Yeah. And I believe Mr. Stockdale has a response on actually both of your questions or your comments.
On the purchasing authority, we provide a monthly report back to the board. It's at the end of that monthly financial report, and it just is a list of all the contracts and purchase orders that are issued above the dollar amount cap that you talked about. So if there are any questions about that, we can go over those, or if you would like to sit down and I can describe what they are, I'd be happy to do that. And then on P-Card, the program, it is it is a riskier program because it is a distributed procurement method. We do audit that. It's something that the Auditor of State typically looks at as well. And then we have it as part of our cycle with our internal audit plan that we look at. We also have one staff member who was added within the last 2 years who does kind of like a pre-audit where when logs are coming in, she's looking at them to approve as we go.
Excellent.
Not a true audit, though. Yeah.
Mr. Briggs, I would just add, in my time on the board, the district has significantly improved the P-card overview process and the controls that are in place around that, and I remember us doing that several years back.
With respect to the insurance, if I'm reading the summary correctly, I have questions. Does it include marching bands and intramural activities? Number one. And number two, it says the aggregate max is $25,000 for a $17,410 premium. If I'm reading it correctly, we could blow right through that very quickly. So it might be worth checking.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up in terms of our athletics, what constitutes under that, so we can follow up, by, between now and our business meeting, when we would be voting on it. And then also check on that, the amount in terms of what is standard, how much are we expending out? We can also get that information for you as well.
Okay. And on the liability insurance, 7.10, I'd be interested in the history of claims and payouts, and whether legal expenses are included in the maximum amount in the limits, or is it separate? And I'm always afraid of the big claim, and would it make sense to get a quote on an additional umbrella covering all of the events that we've talked about? And then 7.11, I noted favorably the cyber reduction in coverage, and it was because we adopted the Arctic Wolf contract, and I was curious as to how much that cost.
Yeah, we can follow up with you on those specific questions on the insurance, and also give you the history of typically what the spend out has been, and also the rates. We can get that for you.
Okay, and finally, 7.12, the med mal coverage, I'd be interested in the claims history on that. It seems to be very limited, and, one horrible situation could wipe that out, plus a lot more, and maybe another umbrella on something like that would be
Yeah.
appropriate.
Most definitely, yep. So I believe I was tracking almost on all of the 7.9 through 14. We'll follow up on each of those with items on that, but thank you for that.
Good, thank you.
I have one more
Yes, Ms.
question.
Jones?
Just as it regards to the P card, are there certain items that can be purchased, or is it pretty much an open?
It's not wide open. Our P-card program uses, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of the code, but the banking codes basically, so the merchant codes. So based on the merchant type, we can lock it down. So if you're registered with the P-card company as primarily like a bar, it won't be allowed to be used there.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, Dr. Morgan?
The next 8 resolutions are our operations resolutions. 8.01, authorizing the CEO to accept the donation of materials and services to construct an outdoor patio at the Executive Grill at East Technical High School, an estimated value of $41,084. With this resolution, the patrons will now be able to enjoy not only the inside of the district's East Tech High School Executive Grill, but now during the fall and spring season, the lunch, an opportunity to do lunch on the patio. 8.02, authorizing the CEO and the Chief Financial Officer and the Board Chair to enter into an agreement authorizing the purchase of food, supplies, and services for student breakfast, lunch, summer food service, supper, and snack programs for the 24-25 school year, in the amount not to exceed $14.5 million. With approval of this annual resolution, the school nutrition team will continue to participate in the school lunch program, for breakfast, after-school snack, and summer food service programs. The team will monitor school nutrition policy changes, conduct market analysis for procurement, and solicit supplemental grant opportunities to continuously improve the quality and variety of meals served next school year. 8.03, authorizing the CEO, the Chief Financial Officer, and the Board Chair to enter into an agreement and to issue a supplier contract to the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority to provide transportation passes for district and non-public school students on an as-need basis for the 24-25 school year in an amount not to exceed $2.5 million. This is an annual resolution presented by our Transportation Department, which ensures district and non-public students have access to public transportation for the 24-25 academic year. 8.04, authorizing the CEO to issue term agreements and purchase orders in the amount of $2.5 million to suppliers awarded as a result of competitive solicitation issued by the Ohio Schools Council Cooperative Purchasing Consortia for the purchase of unleaded diesel and propane fuels to support transportation operations for the 24-25 school year. This also is an annual resolution. 8.05, authorizing CEO to issue term agreements and supplier contracts to Community Bus Service, Right Way Transportation, and Ohio Development Supports Transportation to provide transportation services for students attending non-public charter and community schools and additional non-public schools if needed for the 24-25 school year in the amount not to exceed $4 million. This also is an annual resolution in compliance with the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. 8.06, authorizing the CEO to issue term agreements and supplier contracts to multiple cab and van suppliers to transport special education students to alternative facilities and to transport foster and McKinney-Vento students to promote educational stability for the 24-25 school year in an amount not to exceed $6 million. This too is an annual resolution that supports the transportation of students via cab and van services to alternative locations that are pursuant to students' IEP as well as the McKinney-Vento Act. 8.07, authorizing the CEO to issue term agreements and purchase orders to multiple suppliers to provide parts and services in support of transportation maintenance for the 24-25 school year in an amount not to exceed $1.3 million. This also is an annual resolution for parts and services, enables the Transportation Department to repair and maintain a fleet of 301 school buses along with snowplows, vans, and light trucks.
Thank you. Is there any discussion from board members on those resolutions? Dr. Morgan, I had one question on 8.01 about the patio at Executive Grill. What's behind that proposal? And we'll start with what's behind that proposal.
Yeah, and we may, I don't know if there's someone on our operations team that has more information about that, and if we don't, we can also get a follow-up for you on that. Okay, we have Karen Thompson, our Chief of District Operations.
Thank you. So the Executive Grill, they have an active advisory and partnership, and this is one of the partners. And so they came up with this donation in conjunction with Aaron Creel, who leads our labor and trades. So we have to make sure when we're doing the work with that. So it's involving 2 other unions.
Okay, thank you. And then, sorry, just along with that donation and the value of $41,000, is there upkeep that's anticipated, and are we covering that, or is that something that would also be donated?
In terms of the maintenance of
Yeah.
the patio itself, that's something then that we would absorb as a district with our annual operating costs with the facility.
Okay, and do we have an estimate for that at this time?
We do not. We can get that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right. Any other discussion? Go ahead, Dr. Morgan.
All right, the next 3 are academic resolutions. 9.01, renewing an agreement with Stepstone Academy, a nonprofit community school established under Ohio Revised Code, Chapter 3314, whereby the Cleveland Municipal School District and the community school endorse each other's program. This is a renewal of the endorsing agreement with one Parter Charter School. Parter Charter Schools are considered partners with the goals and objectives of the Cleveland Plan and are actively engaged in the district charter collaboration on behalf of the youth of Cleveland. And the partner schools, the partner charter schools, you can see what they adhere to in their resolution in terms of the rules and regulations and what that partnership looks like. In December of 2018, CMSD's board adopted new eligibility criteria for partnership after receiving recommendations from a working group organized by the Cleveland Transformation Alliance. Last year, the board renewed all partners that meet this criteria, as well as Stepstone Academy. Due to the pandemic and missing report card data, Stepstone has not had the 3 years of performance index data needed to review it against the academic criteria. It has only been evaluated on the residency and demographic data. Last year, we anticipated that the Transformation Alliance would send updated criteria that could be used to evaluate schools without 3-year performance index data such as Stepstone. Though we are still working through that, we are now again recommending a 1-year extension of Stepstone's agreement until we have 3 years of performance index data to review. The newest state report card results will be released in the fall. Beyond a 1-year extension, there are no changes to the current agreement. 9.02, adopting the Student Code of Conduct for the 24-25 school year. You heard this presented earlier during my updating report. But the district and CTU has agreed upon a new student code of conduct for the 24-25 school year. This was in conjunction with the CTU Executive Board. It has approved the changes to the updated code of conduct, which is required by the CTU collective bargaining agreement. The two main items that are a change to the student code of conduct as outlined in my presentation is the cell phone storage and student personal cell phones and electronic device storage during the instructional day, and then updates regarding the district's ombudsman's office to remove the timelines and procedures required before a family can actually go directly to the ombuds office. 9.03, amending the supplier list for the resolution authorizing contracts and purchase orders to multiple suppliers to provide materials, supplies, equipment, and services for Cleveland Municipal Schools on an as-need basis for the 24-25 school year. The board approved Resolution 2024-5802B during the May 21st meeting. That resolution will allow the district to make purchases from multiple commonly used suppliers during the 24-25 school year. The suppliers were inadvertently omitted from the exhibit, which this resolution is corrected.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the operations resolutions?
One quick question
Mr.
on
Riggs.
9.01 with Stepstone. Is there any empirical data that you can rely on for renewal of them?
Yeah, actually, I will invite members of our academic team. We have Matt Rado, who's here from our department. As he's coming up, I could tell you some of the things that we look at on an annual review basis. For any of our community partner schools, there is academic data that we look at, goals that are actually set upon and agreed upon. Many of the contracts that we're actually looking at for renewal at this time, as mentioned in my remarks I was sharing, the pandemic actually impeded actually getting some of that data. Some of these schools were actually still relatively new, so even though the cohort in terms of the data growth, we just do not have that data. As mentioned, we are working with the Transformation Alliance and other organizations to help us think about what other data we can bring here to measure for our partnering charter schools, which in this case, when we don't have that prolonged information or all the information that we're looking for. We're not looking for a prolonged agreement like a 3-year agreement. We're just asking for a 1-year extension. Matt, I don't know if you would add anything else to that.
So, good evening, Chair Ellicott, Dr. Morgan. So the partnership criteria says that we'll use the 3 most recent years, and due to missing pandemic data, and also in the case of Stepstone, they have a kind of a unique grade configuration, and they have changed that over the years. So we aren't able to use those 3 years that we used for all the other schools, which is 1 year of pre-pandemic data and then 2 years that we've had since. So we can look at them on the years. There are two years post that we do have, but it doesn't necessarily align with how we've looked at the other schools. So, which says that we're using a 3-year average because we did not want to let any 1 year have sort of an undue weight. So we could answer the question, I could get you that exact information in terms of where they fall. Basically, it's using those 3 years of data, are they in the top third of all district and charter schools in the city? So I can get you that answer for those 2 specific years. But just based on the fact that we, used 3 years of data for the other schools and we don't have that, the recommendation was that we would give the school an opportunity to have another year of data come out before we would cut them off from that levy funding.
Sure. But it would be interesting to see at least the 2-year data.
We can get that for you.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Any other questions about?
Go ahead. Yes, Mr. Hurd.
Not for you. And I keep sitting here pondering, if I'm running a high school, and this goes to the cell phone policy, and you may have some clue as to how some of the other schools are doing it, but if I'm collecting like 300 cell phones in the morning, how do I secure them, and is there a cost involved in that security?
Yeah. I can begin to share, but then also Dr. Pornes, if you want to make your way up, I know they've been working through this working group. So we actually have several of our high schools that have already started doing this collection. We do have some schools that are, so I believe in Warrensville Heights that are using it for grades 6 through 12, and they're using it in their high school, which are doing the Yonder Bag collection. There is a cost to that. And we've already started looking at some of the cost projections it would be to help give schools some of this work on their way. We're looking at what that would cost and just giving schools some seed dollars to help them implement this policy. And in other places you have, cell phone lockers, cell phone storage kits that can be used. So there's many different things that are being used in the high school space, with great success. Dr. Florence.
We actually have schools across all networks that are currently collecting, and some of them are doing it through the Yonder Bags, through boxes, just taking them up. So we have schools that are already have already put into practice what's in this policy. So what we are doing right now is learning from them. We have captured some videos of them collecting devices so other schools can see the processes and be able to copy those essentially back in their buildings. We are also working with safety and security to ensure that the arrival and dismissal procedures are very clean and clear and crisp, because we are also scanning everyone as they're coming in every day as well. So we know there needs to be alignment around the arrival and dismissal procedures. And so also finally make sure that families are very well aware from as early as possible about what it looks like at each individual school, so we can make sure that everyone is clear about what the process will look like for next year. So we already have several schools that are already doing this and doing it very well. And so we're trying to learn from them as we expand across the district.
And does the policy speak to liability issues? I lost a $1,500 cell phone, now what?
And so I think Dr. Morgan spoke to that earlier. And so if they bring the phone to school, then they are taking that into their own risk.
Okay.
Vice Chair Hudnall?
Thank you. Dr. Florence, I know what a Yonder Bag is because on one of my school visits, I saw it in action, but could you explain to anyone who may not know what that actually means, what it is?
Yes, and Yonder is just one of the companies that sells these products, but it's essentially a bag that the cell phone goes into, and it is locked throughout the course of the school day. And so a child would not be able to access it. They could carry it around with them, but they are not able to access it until the end of the day. When they go through, they scan to remove the magnet, essentially, and then it's unlocked.
It's similar to, for those who may be watching or here, if you've ever been to a concert or sometimes different events where you have to secure your phone until after it's over. It's a very similar type of process.
Okay.
Does the school control those, I'll call them, items that they put it in?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And so the school would be responsible for the entire process and procedure for their individual building.
Okay.
Lawrence?
You're welcome.
Dr. Morgan, I just had a comment on 9.02 around the ombudsman. I know I've mentioned to you before that I think it's important for families to both be able to try to resolve challenges with their school, but also have a clear opportunity without barriers to go further than that if needed. So I appreciate the change on the ombudsman's office and removing some of those barriers. I know it'll be an adjustment, but just wanted to voice my support for that. Okay, and I believe you have another set of many resolutions.
Yes, so the next 8 are equity and culture resolutions. So 10.01, authorizing the purchase of successful innovations incorporated on demand family engagement workshop portal and dashboard for the 24-25 and 25-26 school year in an amount not to exceed $169,580.25. This resolution is coming from our family and engagement department, and it's an on-demand workshop portal. The benefits of this will give live stream workshops for our families, allow us to just provide on-demand content that families can pull, online asynchronously. It allows us to track progress, track more information and data from our families, and then also giving some training tools and supports, not only for families, but also educators or principals, parent ambassadors to use. Also coming along with this is 24/7 customer service and technical support. 10.02 is authorizing the employment of teaching, non-teaching, and school-based administrative staff. This is a routine monthly resolution authorizing a total of 15 new hires this month, and the details are set forth in Exhibit A attached to the resolution. 10.03, authorizing the reclassification of employees. This is a routine monthly resolution authorizing the reclassification of a total of 24 employees this month, and the details are also attached in the resolution. 10.04, accepting the retirements, resignations, and other separations of employees. This is a routine resolution, and we have 74 separations of employees this month, and the details are attached in Exhibit A of the resolution. 10.05, authorizing the issuance of limited contracts for differential positions and the payment of additional earned compensation to employees. This month, we have a total of 207 employees receiving additional compensation, and the details are also attached in the resolution. 10.06, adopting a differentiated salary schedule for principals and assistant principals of the Cleveland Municipal School District. This is an annual adoption of the principal and assistant principal differentiated salary schedule as required by House Bill 525, codified in ORC Section 3311.78. This salary schedule reflects the 4% increase provided to district employees in 24-25, no changes with stipend provisions. 10.07, authorizing the filing of complaints with the Ohio Board of Education against any Cleveland Municipal School District teacher, principal, or assistant principal who terminates their contract after July 10th, 2024. Consistent with the provisions of the Ohio Revised Code 3319.15 and 3319.09, this resolution will allow the board to give authority to the CEO at his discretion to file a complaint to hold the license of any teacher, assistant principal, or principal who submits a separation letter after July 10th. This is standard particularly for our newer board members, standard of what we have done every year. 10.08, authorizing base salary increases for non-bargaining employees and school-based administrators. This resolution is presented with consideration towards a salary increase for non-bargaining employees and school-based administrators. This resolution provides the base salary increases to non-bargaining employees of 4% in the 24-25 school year, consistent with the increase granted to bargaining unit members.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the equity and culture resolutions? Mr. Briggs?
Just one comment on 10.01. I think this program could really be fantastic for the parents. I think the key is to communicate it effectively in multiple different ways so that they realize the advantage of it. It could be spectacular, and I would hope that we would maintain some data on the use of it.
You know, that is definitely, we definitely hear that, and we know it's going to be really important. One of the adjustments, and I see we have Tracy Hill, who's our Executive Director of our Family and Community Engagement Department, and with us tonight. An intentional change that we've made going into next year is that our Family and Community Engagement Department will be in our External Affairs Department, which also is where communication lives as well, just because we see that intentionality between our parents and how we're communicating. That was one of the biggest pieces of feedback we heard in the Listen and Learn tour this year, was that other than safety and security, just how we are communicating with our families. And so we know that that's just an area of improvement, and we think with that intentionality there, we can continue to get the word out even more.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan. Any other questions? All right. That concludes the presentation of the many resolutions on tonight's agenda. Is there any old business? Under new business, I would like to wish a happy birthday to Vice Chair Leah Hudnall, who's celebrating her birthday this month. Is there any other new business? Okay, the next regular board meeting will be a board business meeting on Tuesday, June 25th at 6:30 p.m. at Daniel E. Morgan School, 8912 Morris Court. The chair will now entertain a motion that the board enter into executive session for the purpose of considering the appointment and employment of public employees and officials, preparing for negotiations with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment, and conferring with attorneys concerning disputes involving the Board of Education that are the subject of pending or imminent court action.
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Stockdale, please call the roll.
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudnall? Yes. Mr. Briggs?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mrs. Link? Yes. And Ms. Walchow? Motion passes with 7 votes.
Thank you. The board will now move into executive session. Following executive session, the board will return to this room to conduct some further business. explanation on this resolution?
This resolution is a recommendation to approve a 3-day suspension without pay for violation of district policies and procedures.
Thank you. Any discussion from board members? Oh, this one that I just said? Oh. Got it. Is there any discussion from board members? Okay, hearing no further discussion, would you please call the roll, Mr. Stockdale?
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudnall? Mr. Briggs?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. LeBron?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
Motion passes with 7 votes.
Thank you. The resolution passes. The chair will now entertain a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the termination of a non-teaching employee.
So move.
Second. These are out of order.
Yeah, yeah.
Dr. Morgan, any explanation?
This is a resolution to approve a recommendation for the termination of a district and non-teaching district employee for violation of district policies, procedures, and rules.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing no further discussion, Mr. Stockdale, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudnall? Yes. Mr. Briggs?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. LeBron?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
Motion passes with 7 votes.
Thank you. The resolution passes. The chair will now entertain a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the suspension of a non-teaching employee.
Second.
Thank you. Dr. Morgan, any explanation?
Yes, this is a resolution to approve the recommendation for a 3-day suspension without pay for violation of district policies, procedures, and rules.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing no further discussion, Mr. Stockdale, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudnall? Mr. Briggs?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. LeBron?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
The motion passes with 7 votes.
Thank you. The resolution passes. The chair will now entertain a motion to adopt a resolution amending Resolution 2023-11803B to rescind the previously approved separation of an employee and accepting their retirement.
Second.
Thank you. Dr. Morgan, any explanation?
This resolution is to amend the resolution accepting employee separations that the board adopted on November 21st, 2023, to rescind the board's acceptance of the employee's termination separation and now to accept the employee's retirement.
Thank you. Any discussion from board members? Hearing no discussion, Mr. Stockdale, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudnall? Mr. Briggs?
Yes.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. LeBron?
Yes.
Ms. Link?
Yes.
Motion passes with 7 votes.
Thank you. There being no further business before the board, the chair will now entertain a motion to adjourn this board work session. Thank you. Hearing no objection, this meeting is adjourned. Have a good night.